Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Tablas Creek semi-weekly Instagram live broadcast. I am Jason Haas, as always, your guide in this. My guest this week is someone who I am incredibly excited to talk to, incredibly excited to share with you all. Yannick Benjamin, who is a sommelier, the founder of both a great restaurant and a great wine shop in New York. And also a really important voice in terms of advocacy for inclusiveness in wine, making sure that that people with disabilities are able to access and enjoy wine in an important way. So I can't wait for you to meet Yannick. But while we wait for people to join, I'm going to share a few pictures of what's going on here at the vineyard. So we are in the middle of blending. That's the important work that we're doing. We have the Famille Perrin team, including César Perrin and Valentin and Christian from Famille Perrin, all here. We've been spending the week diving into the reds from 2023. That involves tasting all of the individual lots. It includes brainstorming on blend ideas, and it includes ultimately coming up with the wines that we hope you're all going to get to know over the coming months and years. So that's been the principal work. Out in the vineyard, though, things are proceeding as you would hope. We're starting to get that cover crop under control. You can see in the vineyard how wet it is. That we mowed on the right, the lower mowing we mowed this week. The one on the left we mowed last week. So you can see just in the last week how much regrowth we've seen. And that's just an indication of how much moisture there still is in the ground. In terms of the vines, we're seeing some pretty serious sprouting. So this is Grenache. And up at the top of that, I zoomed in. We have some flower clusters that are starting to form, which is always so exciting. Not every variety is this advanced. You have portions of the vineyard that look more like, so this Roussanne block where this doesn't look, we're only a couple weeks out of bud break in Roussanne. So there's a range of different levels of advancement in the vineyard. And there will continue to be for the rest of the year. The blocks that we have not yet gotten under control, this is me standing in the middle of a block with cover crop that's up to my shoulders. Just gives you a sense of how lush and fertile everything is. I think that's it. That's the quick run through what we're going to be doing. I'm going to stop sharing. So I am going to invite Yannick to join now. I see. Hopefully this will work as smoothly as it does when the technology works. So I cannot wait for you to meet him. Hello, Yannick.
How are you? What's going on?
You got us in the middle of our blending week, and also, of course, the middle of springtime here in Paso Robles. It's kind of peak green and peak spring.
Mm-hmm.
How about you? Where are you joining from?
I'm here in Midtown Manhattan on 1 West 54th Street. You know, I also do the wine program for a private club here at the University Club.
Cool.
And so that's where I'm at. It's a beautiful day here in the city. You know, it's about 70 degrees, so perfect spring day indeed.
Excellent. Well, I gave a very quick introduction to you when I first started the live, but for anybody who had not yet joined then, so I'm incredibly excited to have Yannick Benjamin joining me. He's founder of Restaurant Contento and Beaupierre Wine and Spirits in New York, and of course the founder of nonprofit Wine on Wheels, wine enthusiast, sommelier wine director of the year a couple of years ago. So, Yannick, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to see you, Jason.
Excellent. So, I would love to start by just asking you to talk about like the place of wine in your life as you were growing up. Was wine something that you gravitated to when you were young, or was it something you came to a little later?
Well, you know, I'm first generation, so both of my parents are French, and my father worked only in restaurants when he first came to the United States. He came here on January 3rd, 1963, and he stayed working as a dishwasher for the first 2 years, and then he kind of moved his way up. My mom, she was in hospitality as well. She was a private housekeeper for some families, and that's what she did. And then she also worked at night as a co-check person for a couple of like the fancy restaurants here in New York during the 80s and 90s. And then I had my uncles and I had cousins that also worked in the business. So it was kind of all around me. And of course, like very typical Sundays were a pretty big day at our home. We had a lot of relatives come over. And so wine was certainly instrumental. I don't think they were so hung up on, what labels they were drinking. Usually it was French and usually it was Bordeaux or then maybe Burgundy. And but it was really a way to bring people together, kind of a communal a way of having a family to catch up and to gossip about what's happening in restaurants and to gossip about their families and friends in France and here in New York. So certainly very instrumental.
And I read that your father worked at La Grenouille, right? That kind of iconic French
Yeah, yeah,
restaurant.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. And it's still there.
and so did did that restaurant world, were you a part of that restaurant world? Did you
Mm.
hang out with him? Was this top of mind as you were growing up?
Yeah, but for sure. I mean, I was very lucky that I was able to spend some of my summers in France. And my mom, she grew up right in the heart of the Médoc in Bordeaux. So it was very common, to go and knock on a small chateau in Bordeaux. And at that time, there was well over 7,000 chateaus. A little bit less now, but there's still so many of them. You would knock on the door and you would buy your case or two cases or whatever it is. And I always remember that distinctive smell of the cellar, all that fun stuff, and I just absolutely loved it, and that the smell of the fermentation. And then with my father, it was very common that my dad worked a very traditional French schedule, which meant that he did the opening, he worked lunch, and then he had a little break between 3 and 5, and then was back on the floor at 5:30, 6 o'clock. And I do recall many times going there at a younger age, stopping by at the restaurant and having family meal with the staff and all that, particularly with the restaurant called Lutece. That was definitely a big part of my life in many ways. And that's where it all kind of stemmed from too as well.
So you started your restaurant career at some pretty high profile places, places
Very much so.
like Georges and Le Cerf. Um,
Yeah,
what
exactly.
was that phase of your life like?
It was an incredible phase of my life. Having to work at Le Cirque, especially, during the mid 90s. And this was such a crazy time because I was only 18 years old and people were just buying wines. People had these crazy expense accounts. Money was not an object. The internet was just booming. So people were spending money left and right. I just couldn't understand how someone would spend thousands of dollars for one bottle. And the truth of it all was there weren't many sommeliers here in the city. There wasn't much of that culture, but anywhere, I mean, most of the United States. And we have so much to thank for people like Daniel Jonas and Kevin Zarelli. And, Le Cirque, when they reopened their doors in 1997, they had hired a young American who was a protege of Kevin Zarelli, and his name is Ralph Hersom, and who I immensely respect and still stay in touch with. He was only a 27-year-old American kid who was working as a wine director for what, at least at that time, when as an 18-year-old, just felt like the only place on earth. It was such a special place, and you were serving the best of the best, the creme de la creme, all these big socialites, right? It was really such an incredible experience, and it was unbelievable to be 18 and to try some of these amazing wines.
And so was there a particular moment that kind of spurred you to decide that you wanted to make wine a focus?
It's funny. I can't tell you if there was ever a particular wine that I got hooked on or that got me hooked on wine. But I would always say what I will always say is that I always just loved hospitality. I love being around people. I loved working the floor. So originally, when I first got into this business, I was just here in New York, in the 80s, 70s, and 90s. The Metro D was like the big person, right? They kind of like they were the gatekeeper, and so that's what I wanted to be. And then eventually, I wanted to open up my own restaurant. And then all of a sudden, this boom with the sommelier came about, and then that kind of changed my course. But what I will say is this: I remember being 13 years old, and I remember visiting Chateauguay School, and I remember going there, and I just remember picking up the wines with my family friend. I remember tasting the wines, and I remember the whole smell. It was just absolutely incredible, and that really resonated with me.
I'm sure. I have very similar memories of my own childhood of visiting cellars with my dad on
I'm
his
sure,
important
of
trips.
course.
Like I remember we were at the cellars at Bruno Claire in Burgundy and going down underground into the cellar and having
Oh
him
yeah.
point to the ceiling to me and say, "Do you see what's up there?" And I looked up and
Hmm.
the roots of the vine from the vineyard had grown down through the
Wow.
soil and were growing through the roof of the cave.
Wow.
Um,
That's
was
unbelievable.
amazing.
I
Um,
I've actually visited Bruno Claire, and it's really just a magical place. It's a very special place for sure.
Absolutely. I love those wines too. Uh, so, so your life took a very unexpected turn
Mm. Mm.
when at age 25 you were in a car accident
Mm.
and paralyzed from the waist down.
Mm.
Did you wonder at that time if you were going to be able to continue to have a career in wine and in restaurants?
Well, of course, for sure. Definitely, it was quite a shock to have this happen at the age of 25 years old. There was a lot of confusion. There was a lot of anxiety. And, up to that point, I had built my whole world around working in restaurants. And really, I was working as a floor sommelier, and my goal and my objective was to work as the wine director eventually.
Yeah.
But obviously, it's such a physically demanding job that when I was told that I was never going to walk again, I was dumbfounded. I didn't have any words. But I don't think I ever fell into this hole of depression, or I fell into this deep hole. Actually, what I do remember immediately after being told that, maybe 3, 4 days after my surgery, I had called up the general manager. I had called up the wine director at the restaurant that I was working at. The chef at the time was Gabriel Coiter. And I had asked him, can you please send me out a layout of the restaurant? And I was already thinking about moving tables around and how I'd get around with my wheelchair and all that kind of stuff. So, um, I kind of embraced it in many ways as far as like it being a big challenge
Yeah.
and an obstacle. And I was ready to face it. But I guess what I wasn't really prepared for was all of these social obstacles that I didn't even think about.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, of course. you know, um, trying to get a job, right? And it was surprisingly, there were a lot of restaurants that were actually pretty ADA compliant, and I think they were manageable to work in. But I think it was trying to convince people, you know, hey, I can do this. You can believe in, I think people naturally, to no fault of their own, have these kind of not prejudices, but they have these biases that they don't realize. And we definitely live in a culture where, in order to believe it, you actually need to see it, right? And so, unfortunately, even up to now, there are not many people with disabilities, let alone someone on a wheelchair, who's rolling around doing the work of a sommelier in a restaurant, right? And so I thought, that was a very big challenge. And, of course, like, um, just other perceptions that people have made up on their own based on what they think and based on what society says, right? Those were big challenges to really overcome. And then transportation, the lack of accessibility, broken elevators, all that kind of stuff I did not think of. Even when I'm traveling to different wine regions, right? A lot of these places, they're old places, right? So finding a bathroom that I can use and all that kind of stuff. So these are things that I didn't really think of. Of course, I'm at a different stage of my life. It's 21 years after, so I'm like all prepared. I'm mentally prepared. I'm physically prepared. But for sure, there were definitely a lot of challenges that I was certainly not ever ready for.
Right. No, I'm sure. Did, I have to assume that all of this sort of process of discovery and realizing the things that really were not ready for you to step in and interact in the way that you always had. Was that a driving factor behind the charities that you've been a part of founding,
Yes,
the Wheeling Forward and Wine on Wheels?
for sure, absolutely. Growing up, I wouldn't say that I grew up in a strict religious home, but my first 10 years, or actually I should say, first 12 years of school was predominantly in a Catholic school. And I had the same art teacher for the first 8 or 10 years. His name is Brother Tony Reynolds. He was a Christian brother. He still is, as a matter of fact. And I still keep in touch with him. And he just had a real profound effect on me. And almost to the point where I almost convinced myself to maybe go into the service of becoming a Christian brother or the priesthood. Of course, that was just a thought. But I just really admired them, that they would sacrifice family for the greater good. It just really the ultimate sacrifice. And I knew that for sure that there was a part of me that wanted to be a part of this world, right? So, of course, being in hospitality, that's part of that world. But I knew that I wanted to be able to help out in any way possible. And what sped up that process was certainly the car accident, right? I was with a lot of other individuals, a lot of victims of gang violence, and other crazy situations that caused them to either become paralyzed from the neck down, paralyzed from the waist down, you name it. And I just recall, my gosh, I was there in rehab for 3 to 4 months, and I would have so many family and friends come and visit me, while all these other individuals had no one, absolutely no one go visit them. And that just broke my heart. And so I just said, well, why isn't there some kind of resource that they can go to get that love, care, and support? Because at the end of the day, to really try to do this on your own, you're just delusional. You need that love, care, and support, and you need to be surrounded by great people.
Amazing. So in fast forward to 2021, you in East Harlem.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that you made there to sort of make it be a nexus for community?
Yeah, for sure. I would love to answer that. Thank you. It really happened organically. And actually, my dear friend and mentor, George Gallego, he was actually assigned to me when I first got injured. And he's also a paraplegic, but he had been a paraplegic for 10 years prior to my car accident. So he had been on top of me for years after my car accident. He said, stop working for people. Stop working for people. You need to do your own thing. And so I just said, well, George, you have no idea, man. Owning your own restaurant, it is a nightmare. There's too many moving parts. It's not possible. But I do remember a lot of people, obviously, they were all well-intentioned, and they were just looking out for my feelings and for my well-being, because they just hated seeing me having to go to these interviews, sending out my resume time after time and getting rejected. And they just said, well, if you're ever going to work as a sommelier in a restaurant or in any place, you're going to have to build it around your needs. And on one hand, I would take it to heart, but on the other hand, I understood what they were trying to say. But finally, I said, one day I'm actually going to do that. I'm going to build a restaurant where I can work at and build it for my needs. But, also want to build a place where we practice, not just having a restaurant that's, perfectly laid out and ADA compliant, meaning American Disabilities Act, but a place where we practice social accessibility, where we treat people with respect and dignity. And so to me, one of the greatest compliments we can get is when I hear people with disabilities come to the restaurant because they know they're going to be treated a certain way.
Absolutely. And then it seems like because you didn't have enough on your plate, you decided to open a wine shop with your wife very near where you grew up, right?
Yeah, in the same building, actually. Oh. So the name of the wine store is called Beau Pierre, which means beautiful rock. My father's name is Pierre, and it means beautiful Pierre. So it was a play on words. But I grew up on 664 10th Avenue between 46 and 47, and the restaurant is located on 664 10th Avenue between 46 and 47. And so I had this great opportunity a couple of years ago to open up a restaurant along with my wife Heidi. And we're going into our second year, and of course it's had its challenges and all that fun stuff, but we really love it, and it's continuously evolving and continuously growing. And I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to live right below my mother. My sister lives right next door. To be around my two nephews, to be working alongside my wife. It's just a real privilege, and it's a beautiful thing.
Oh, it's amazing. Everybody's dream. So how do
Yeah,
you
yeah, of course.
how do you divide up your time between your different responsibilities, between the restaurant and the shop and the charity and
Yeah,
like
yeah, for
personal
sure.
life, the marathons and all of
Yeah,
that?
yeah. I mean, listen, I think when you love what you do, it doesn't feel as challenging for sure. I absolutely love going to Contento. It's like, when I created Contento, I created it with it in mind that it would be a place that I'd want to go have a glass of wine and where it's going to be fun, where there's not going to be any of that pretentiousness, and there's going to be a mosaic of different people. And, as far as the wine store, I really wanted to make it very family oriented. That was really important to me. And I just love these small little wine stores that we have in Europe, whether it's in Italy or Spain or in France. But I really wanted to bring that same feeling back to New York, but have its own little Hell's Kitchen flavor because that's where the wine store is at. So that was really important. And then, of course, listen, as anyone knows, when you're starting off with small businesses, there's a lot of challenges. You don't make a lot of money, so you have to have a lot of side hustles, and I think at the end of the day, it does pay off. But I'm not going to lie, these last 2 years have been really brutal. I work pretty much every single day, but I know in my heart of hearts that it's all going to pay off. I'm not looking to be the richest person. I'm just looking to have a good quality of life and all that. And, spend enough time with my wife, spend enough time with my mother, with my sister, and with my little doggies. And that's it. And have time to travel and all that kind of stuff. But I think once you do what you find what you love, it's, they there's a famous Roman proverb, and it says amor fati. That means to love the faith, right? To work according to what nature gives you, right? And then instead of complaining, just work with it and make it happen.
Love it. So what would your most important piece of advice be to a restaurant or a wine shop or a winery even, who wanted to be more accessible to a full range of their potential customers?
Well, I think we have a responsibility when we work in hospitality. It's not just about you know serving one population, right? The non-disabled population. No, it's about serving a mosaic of different people, right? And so that's really important. But you also have to understand when you're making these changes, whether it's practicing better social accessibility, physical accessibility, you in the long run will benefit from it. And I guarantee you, you will know someone that will benefit from it as well. And also something to keep in mind, and some really important statistics. We have 61 million Americans that have a disability. That means 1 in 4. Within those 61 million Americans, they have over $1 billion of spending power. One of the biggest conversations that we're currently having in the wine world is, wine consumption is dropping, what's going on? And I'm telling you right now, we need to cater more to the 61 million, to these 61 million folks because they're ready to spend some money, but they just want to feel loved. They want to feel like we're talking to them, People with disabilities, they love wine just as much as everyone else. But people are going to spend their money when they feel like they're being spoken to and when they're being catered to.
That echoes so neatly with, I feel like, what one of our biggest lessons was during COVID, where
Right.
obviously during COVID, the ways that we were used to interacting with our customers, a lot of them disappeared. I mean, there were no
Right.
wine festivals, was
Yeah.
closed. We weren't doing wine dinners. And so we
No.
started doing things that people could access on their own schedule,
Right.
on their own time, home, things that were virtual, things that where their location didn't matter.
Yeah.
And we realized that doing that highlighted that we then had so much more access to such a wider range of potential customers than we had been getting to before COVID. But one of those,
Exactly.
like, you do the right things to be accessible and realize that you are actually serving both your existing customers and this potential new pool of customers.
Exactly. That's exactly correct.
So I hate to ask because it seems like it's already a very long list, but like, do you have any new projects that you're working on? Anything coming up?
No, I think I think self-improvement is already a challenge. Every day I try to I think for me, what I really want to go back into, which I kind of lost track of, I try to stay very disciplined as much as possible. but getting my mornings back because that's very special to me. And I still do, but it's not at the same rate that I want to. But usually I like to get up very early in the morning and, have those 3 to 4 hours all to myself. I really want to get back into in depth of studying the world of wine because things are constantly changing, and, I'm a big practitioner of stoicism, and journaling to myself, continuously reading, traveling and learning. That's really my main objective. Of course, my long-term goal is to open up a small little wine bar in my neighborhood that I was born and raised in. But that's long-term, but that's something that I'm definitely targeting for the future.
Cool. So do you have can you share your most recent wine discovery? Have to be like a favorite thing, but something cool that you discovered recently that you'd like to share.
Yeah, I think I'll give you a couple things very briefly. But I am just so fascinated with wines of the ancient world, right? And when I talk about the ancient world, I'm talking about wines that are from Georgia, from Armenia, from Turkey. I think there's such a great history, right? And I think to fully understand the present, we have to understand the past, right? I think that's so really important. There's a wonderful gentleman who's making wines out in the western part of Turkey, right in the Aegean Sea, in a place called Izmir. And his name is Said. He's an incredible human being. I went to go visit him, was it last year, 2 years ago? And what he's doing is he's reviving grapes that are basically gone extinct, and reviving them because people forget that Turkey is the fifth largest grower of grapes. And they had this great history of winemaking. Of course, things changed and all that stuff, but there's still 125 different wineries. So I think that whole part of the world really just fascinates me and all that kind of stuff, and understanding what the Romans were drinking and how they were making wines. And listen, I'm always, ready to learn. I went back to Napa Valley recently and I explored there. I'm just reminded by just the incredible level of winemaking that's happening on the West Coast, from Walla Walla down to, where you're at, to Paso Robles. It's just so impressive. And the wines have never been better. I mean, the quality just in general globally is just stunning. So I'm so glad that I had this opportunity, that I just don't have to sell one wine from one particular region or one grape. I think that would make me very unhappy. But I have this opportunity to taste wines from all around the world.
Yeah, I've very much enjoyed following your trips vicariously on Instagram. So
thank you.
It's it is, I think, one of the things that any of us who've been in the world of wine for a decent amount of time, you keep going back to the fact that it is an incredibly diverse and wide world out there, with thousands of different grapes that people use to make wine out of in hundreds of countries. And so
I agree. No, it is. We're very blessed to work in this industry, and again, the amount of subjects that comes with it is what's topography, geography, history. It's endless. It's a beautiful thing.
Cool. So I really do try to keep these conversations to a half hour. It has been a half hour, which does not seem possible. But I would love you to share how people, first of all, follow you and learn more about what you're doing, but also how they follow or get involved with things like.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Certainly you can go to www.wineonwheels.org, and that's WINEONWHEELS.org. And that is the website for my nonprofit. So please check us out. And then you can follow me at Yannick Benjamin on Instagram. And everything's pretty much interlinked with my wine store, Beaupierre, the restaurant Contento, and the nonprofit Wine on Wheels. And you can see all the good work that we're doing. And we're helping a lot of organizations. We're using wine, and we're turning it into hope.
Amazing. Okay, I'm going to end on that note. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity. It's great to see you, and keep up the good work, man. Your wines are amazing.
Thank you. Please, you keep up your good work.
Okay. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Have a great day. Thank you, Yannick. Thank you, everybody, Tablas Creek and audience, for joining us. I will be back in 2 weeks, and I'll have an actual literal rock star, not just a figurative rock star, joining me. We'll have Alicia Moore, who you may know better as Pink, joining for a conversation in 2 weeks. Meanwhile, I hope you have a lovely spring wherever you are, and see you soon.